what initiatives do we need from a risk perspective around this here? Because this is exactly what we're trying to do, is balance. I like what Lyndon is saying. There are constraints as well. From a resource perspective, the hardware, the software. Let's think about it that way. Maybe the connectivity as well, as you and I were discussing earlier today. But there's huge opportunity. This needs to be balanced. How do we start governing this, if I use that word, Manisha, from a broader perspective? Some of your thoughts on initiatives or policies that are needed?
So governance is about control, and as you're aware, and our control initiatives would, it's a reaction, or it is in preparation for a threat. The threat in this instance would be risks that we do not understand, or that is unclear, or that we've created fear, or we have mistrust about. So we would have to then look at what tools are available to us to address these threats to ourselves as consumers, to our economy and our environment, and definitely to our businesses. So in the absence of existing legislation or a unified guideline within our current South African economy, we've got to draw from the global environment. And when we look around and when we scan around, it's not that unusual. It is that Africa is lagging. We're perhaps the only continent in the world that is not, making enough progress in this regard in terms of having the regulatory frameworks in place. Countries such as China, Japan, Singapore, as well as the UAE, Saudi, are definitely, if they don't have legislation in place, they have frameworks in place that provide guidance around accountability, transparency, fairness, and that sort of thing. So when we do scan, we find that we can rely on the UK, the US, and perhaps the leader at the moment is the EU AI Act. This has caused a lot of noise, and we can draw from that. And why we also like drawing from this is because it has a very strong risk mitigation look and feel to it, somewhat to ISO. And there is a new ISO that is in place that you can rely on as the golden standard for assisting with risk mitigation. So to answer your question, there's a lot we can do in terms of determining what type of software we're using. So an assessment type of approach to it, to see what we could be using in the future, what could be beneficial to our business, what would be the risks around that, and how do we categorize those risks, and then how we deal with each category. So the EU AI Act has been, it's currently categorized certain high-risk type of AI software, and then medium to low risk. And this would be a really great approach for us to adopt. And also the high-risk AI components is very small, and it is a very small part of the overwhelming advantage of the improving efficiencies and growing businesses and supporting economies. So if we are able to categorize this, then we have the advantage of eliminating a lot of that fear up front, to say, guys, this is not as bad as we think it is. But even the small percentage of it is that bad, it does result in billions of dollars and rands of losses annually. Any form of AI software that is manipulative, it is deceptive, it is causing you to cause harm to yourself or to vulnerable groups, such as persons that do not have the mental capacity, or children, minors, your employees, in order to get advantage in a workplace, any form of scenario that may deter us from using our own mental ability is considered prohibited. An example of this would be a simple device in a toy that may cause children to change their behaviors. The use of certain devices in certain labor forces to encourage them to work longer hours on the assumption that they have the ability and the strength to do so, but only to bring harm to themselves. In the other types of examples would be any form of AI that is going to bring harm to society as a whole. So whether it is social scoring or the identifications of persons in terms of from security perspective, the observations of certain behaviors and making inferences from this. The legislation is clear that we as leaders would have to put in place certain mechanisms to determine whether this is a risk, whether this is a reality in terms of the AI product or software that we're using, and then we would have to prohibit that use. And they give us a bunch of methodologies in order to use this. And the second and third categories would be your medium risk and then no or minimal risk. And the medium risk would be they are not banned, they are permitted. And an example of this would be where it is used to humans, there is a great advantage, such as in the medical environment, where it could save a life if we were able to use a device that has an AI function to it. But we require certain practices in place, and this is where we come in as leaders. We are then required to put in guidelines to advise humans that are interacting with the machine. We have to create certain information guidelines on the use of it, the training and the development of people that are interacting with it. And certainly no information must be withheld from any person that is engaging with this type of equipment that is, in terms of AI. And this is mainly relating to safety and health issues. And this is where we would say guideline is critical. And then finally, where there is no or minimal risk, once again, the guidance of leadership in the form of governance and the various governance principles that we implement in our business, be it in the forms of policy, procedure development, guidelines, training of our people, communication, ongoing monitoring and assessment, that would be encouraged at the two other category stages.
Nisha, this reminds me that any new tech takes roughly about 3 to 5 years before the regulator can get on top of it, which I think is fair. How do you regulate something that you don't know its impact potential, etc.? But on the same light, then we've also been talking about the regulatory sandbox concept, which is in the other side that sits with us, saying that if we're using the AI, how do we give regulator a heads up on what we're planning to do? And I think therein lies a nice medium for us to be able to really enable this here.